In this video, we're going to touch on the common ways to permanently join parts together, or at least that's what we're hoping to do. If you want two parts stuck together, we can achieve this with glues, or we can use heat to kind of weld the two pieces together. Let's go over some popular ways to glue prints together and a few pointers on each method. First is using good old super glue. It's quick, it's easy, it's not the absolute pinnacle of strength, but it is pretty strong and it's going to be good enough for most of your parts. I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10 in terms of bonding strength. Dollar store super glue, it works well, it's super cheap, or you could opt to use a more expensive one. There are some gel ones out there that are a bit easier to work with. Now super glue is going to need your surfaces to be nice and flat because it doesn't expand like other glues. And this is great when you want your parts nice and flush without any spacing, but if your surfaces aren't perfectly flat, you may get some bonding issues. It also struggles to glue on print lines, so sand down those surfaces when needed. And remember, it cures really fast, so think twice. Always do a few test fits where you practice putting it together nice and aligned. You don't want to deal with taking it apart, cleaning it and starting again. Polyurethane glue. Not sponsored, but Gorilla Glue is my go-to brand, and it's also a popular choice in the 3D printing community. The process is a bit more involved than super glue, as you need to damp one surface and then apply a thin coat to the other and then clamp it and let it cure for a day or two. But if done right, it'll be a little bit stronger than super glue. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. It does expand a little bit, so it might separate your parts by a millimeter as it cures. But the upside of this is that your prints don't have to be perfectly flat, as it can kind of fill that gap a bit and give you a nice solid bond. It's also good at bonding to a lot of different materials, so if you wanted to join your printed part to metal or wood, I'd probably use polyurethane glue. This dice here was originally glued together with super glue, but after a few impacts it actually split apart. So I re-glued it with some Gorilla Glue as it's pretty impact resistant, and it's been fine ever since. Two-part epoxy. Now this is going to be way more effort than super glue and polyurethane glue, but it's going to be extremely strong, and your printed parts are probably going to break before that bond does. I'd probably give epoxy a 9, 9.5 out of 10 in terms of bond strength. It doesn't really expand, but it can be used as a gap filler. So this means if you have two parts that aren't perfectly flat, whack a whole bunch of epoxy in there, let it cure, you've got a nice strong bond and a very solid infill. It's also really great at joining large surfaces, as sometimes it might be hard to get them perfectly flat to use super glue on. It's kind of just the big guns when you really need something to be stuck. Hot glue is another way to join your prints, but I'm not going to recommend this as a go-to because it's going to give you a bit of a gap between your parts, and it's not even that strong. It's probably like a 3 or a 4 out of 10. I'm just letting you know about this in case you need a desperate quick fix. So for most parts, super glue is going to be more than enough, but if you need a little bit more strength and a bit more impact resistance, use maybe polyurethane glue, but you do have to wait an extra day or two for it to cure, and there's a little bit more involved in it. And for the parts you want really stuck, use epoxy, but it is a bit of an involved process, so only use it when you actually need to. As always, read safety labels, protect your workspace. When needed, use a ventilated area and PPE like nitrile gloves and safety glasses. Also make sure you clean and prep your surfaces as instructed by the glue, and clamp when you need it. There is another effective way to join pieces, and that is using heat to kind of weld the parts together. Now there is a bit of a learning curve in making a strong weld, and it is a little bit of a hack job, so I'm just going to make you aware that it exists in case you hit the situation where you'll need to use it. So you can use a soldering iron or a wood burning tool to melt the plastic where the two parts meet and kind of create like a stitch between them, and this gives you a pretty strong bond. For PETG, I'd probably set it to 240 to 260 degrees. And you can also grab some filament to melt it in and give you a bit more material to work with. A cheap 3D pen is really great at this, and if you use it with a soldering iron, you can get some pretty strong joins. Just make sure you're using the same filament as what you're joining, and make sure the parts actually get hot so they melt and join together. Now don't grab your soldering iron and just start hacking, because you will destroy the tip by doing this. So use an old or a ruined one, and it might even be a good idea to have your own dedicated soldering iron. A cheap one can do it. Don't let it get too hot or you'll burn the plastic. Watch out for the fumes, an extractor might help here. Don't burn yourself, be careful and wear safety glasses. Welding is a bit situational, but it's really good for parts like this mask here. So this mask was printed in 3 pieces, and as you can see there's actually very little surface to effectively glue it along. So welding with an iron and a 3D pen was perfect, and it gives us a really nice and strong bond. But as you can see, the surface you weld, it's a bit rough and a bit unsightly. Like I said, situational. Most parts are going to have a good amount of surface area to glue, so I'll stick to that when I can, but it's a really handy tool to have when you find yourself you're in the situation that glue won't cut it.